Hello and welcome to Stone Club Walks and Talks. This is the first episode of our new podcast series and I'm your host Matthew Shaw, co-founder of Stone Club with Lally Macbeth.
Hello, I'm Lally Macbeth. Stone Club is a place for people to congregate, to muse, and most importantly to stomp to stones. We believe the journey is as important as the destination, so come on a walk with us.
We have two guests in this first episode, the artist Teän Roberts, who we caught up with on a walk on St Mary's, one of the Isles of Scilly, and also the peace activist and campaigner, author, the list goes on, Satish Kumar. It was a real honour to chat to him about his journey, some epic walks and so much more. And we'll begin by joining Teän, so let's venture together to St Mary's. Here we are on St Mary's. We've just visited the first stop on our walking tour. I'm here with Lally Macbeth and our guest today is Teän Roberts, resident of the island currently and Stonian expert in all things stony. Where have we just been, Teän?
We've just been to Bamps Khan Burial Chamber, which is a really well preserved burial chamber, a Stonian chambered tomb on St Mary's, which has a stunning view out over Tresco and Samson and Briar. It's a little bit misty today, but it kind of adds to the, what did you call it, lioness?
The
Atlantean feeling.
Yes.
Yeah, of the experience. It's a Bronze Age tomb, and it was a kind of communal burial site with maybe other kind of uses too, like ceremonial uses. It's unsure. But below that is a ancient village, a bit like Carnuni or Chaisworcester kind of feeling, which was it wasn't contemporary with the tomb above. It was much later, but they didn't take any of the stones from the chamber tomb to make the village, so either it was still in use then or it was very respected and revered because it wasn't tampered with at all for the building of the village. And the village is amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing. We find quite a lot of new homes.
Yeah.
And really well preserved there. There's the curb entrance and then the passage tomb is all intact. It looks amazing.
As well.
Yeah, and the hearths in the village.
I could happily live there.
Yeah, it's quite civilised, wasn't it?
Extremely. The plaque said that it
Hello. And so this coastal path we're taking now.
Yeah.
So which way are we on the island? Are we on the south of the island here? Do you know which?
I think we're on the north.
The north side of the island.
Yeah, we're north. We're heading east.
Yeah.
We're going along towards Bar Point now.
Yeah.
We're going through the Pines. We call this. I don't know if there's like a official name for it, but we just call it the Pines, and it's a kind of little kind of forest of Monterey pine trees, which are very old, not native to the islands like originally, but I think they were introduced like a long time ago, along with when the gardens were planted on Tresco.
Yeah.
Trees then.
Yeah.
Which is good because it's very windy up here. Not today, but it's good to have a bit of tree cover. And soon we will reach a very beautiful beach, very white sand, which is the site of an old causeway that was a kind of link between St Mary's and Tresco and St Martin's a long time ago, before the islands were flooded, because it used to just be two islands.
Yeah.
One called Enor, which is this one we're on now, and one, I can't remember the original name of it, but it's now St Agnes and Gue. So those two were always separate, just a few miles apart. But then there was a big inundation of water at some point, and the field systems in between were flooded. I think it was gradual, but like not that gradual.
Yeah.
And that formed the kind of 5 islands, well, the 4 islands that we now have that were once Enor, which is St Mary's, Tresco, St Martin's and Briar, and then St Agnes and Gew, still separate over there. But yeah, this bit here used to have a kind of causeway across, and there are still some rocks in the middle called like pavement rock and things like that, and bits where the sand washes away, and you reveal like glimpses of old kind of cobbled streets and things, allegedly. And then there are some rocks in between that have Cornish names for like settlements and things, so they think that they were once similar to the little ancient village we were just at, the Bronze Age village, like some things between. And there are some places like over on Samson where if you're going through on your boat at low tide, you've got to be really careful that you don't hit the old field boundaries, because they're just kind of sticking up like old walls and things, and you can mess up your outboard on them if you're not what you need. My granddad tells me many horror stories about that kind of thing happening.
Right, well, let's continue along. We'll catch up and continue our walk with Teän very shortly, but first of all, let's venture to Heartland in Devon and let's have a listen to the conversation I had with Satish Kumar. Satish, it's a real pleasure to chat with you this morning, and I thought I'd start with Dartmoor. At least two of your great loves, one of which was Dartmoor itself and walking. The other one was reflecting on a life of walking and also a life of activism and campaigning, but one that's been done so in such a beautiful and dedicated and gentle way. So I thought perhaps we could start with walking, because famously you did this peace walk when you were a slightly younger man.
Yes. Yes. Dartmoor is my love. And I think Dartmoor is one of the few really beautiful wild places still left. And we should protect it, we should cherish it, we should love it, and we should not spoil it. Because there are not many wild places left in Britain. So, and Dartmoor has a kind of soul, it's a kind of spirit. When I'm on the Dartmoor, I feel uplifted, I feel kind of energized, I feel transcended somehow. So Dartmoor has a great effect on me. And this is why it was my pleasure to make a film about Dartmoor and call myself an earth pilgrim. So it was a pilgrimage to Dartmoor, in Dartmoor, around Dartmoor, and so on. But that walk on Dartmoor was a kind of culmination of my walk from India to America. And that was 8,000 miles walk through 15 different countries. And I did that 8,000 mile walk without a single penny in my pocket, because the walk was for peace. And I was inspired by Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell, at age 90, was protesting against the nuclear bomb. And he said that until government bans the bomb, I'm not going to move away from the Whitehall. So he was arrested and was put in jail. And I was 26 years old, young man, reading this news in India, sitting in a cafe, waiting for coffee. And when I read this, my goose pimple went up. And I said, wow, here's a man of 90 going to jail for peace in the world. What am I doing, young man, sitting here drinking coffee? So I was with a young friend, and so we started to talk. And in the end, after long discussion and consideration, my friend and I decided to walk from India, from the grave of Mahatma Gandhi, to 4 nuclear capitals of the world: Moscow, Paris, London, Washington, D.C. And that journey really made me kind of who I am. That was a kind of a formative journey, going through Muslim countries, Christian countries, communist countries, capitalist countries, rich countries, poor countries, mountains, deserts, snow, forest, everything you can imagine, and doing without money. Because I felt that the wars begin in fear, and peace begins in trust. So if I was protesting against the war and the bomb and for peace, then I have to be peace. I have to demonstrate peace, and not demonstrate for peace, but demonstrate peace. So how do you show that I am peace and a peaceful person and I practice peace? I have to show trust. And how do you show trust? If you have money in your pocket, you buy your food, you go and stay in a bed and breakfast or a hotel or a guest house, you buy your clothes, you buy your shoes, everything is bought. You don't need anybody. But when you have no money, you have to depend on the strangers to give you food, to give you shelter, to give you clothes, to give you shoes. And for 2.5 years, I didn't touch money. I depended totally on the hospitality of the strangers. So that was a big experience for me, to live in trust and not knowing in the morning whether I will get a food in the evening, not knowing in the morning where I'll have bed at night. And that kind of uncertainty, and living in that uncertainty and still trusting that something will happen. And trust worked out, although there were some difficulties, there were some hardships, and there were some days when I went hungry, some days when I slept outdoor. All those things happened, but they were all worth it. And I feel stronger and much more trusting the world, and much more trusting humanity, and not always doubts and a kind of fear. So that was the experience of my walk. Long answer.
Well, what an incredibly long walk, and comparatively very short answer for all of those places. I think what you must have seen, I can only imagine the changes in landscape, the changes in cultures, the changes in wealth, as you described, the changes in the people that you met. I was wondering then about how that experience changed your view of the world, because you were coming from Rajasthan or born in Rajasthan, and coming from a background of being a Jain. And so there was this animistic worldview and this peaceful worldview as part of a spiritual practice. But did that develop and did that evolve as you encountered different people and cultures and landscapes, do you think?
Yes, it evolved. The thing is that I met all the religious people, because I came from a Jain background. And in Jain background, the most important principle, first and foremost principle, is do no harm. Do no harm to yourself, do no harm to other people, and do no harm to nature. And so that principle of doing no harm, non-violence, ahimsa, that was the kind of foundation on which I built my walk. And I think the reason that I was able to make this decision and take this decision that I'll walk and I'll walk without money was because of my training as a monk for 9 years. But I had walked for 9 years without money, because for 9 years I had no money. I had a begging bowl, I had bare feet, and depending on the generosity and a kind of hospitality of strangers. And so Jain principle were a kind of training ground for me. A monkhood was a training ground for me. But what I learned during my walk was I met the Muslims, I met the Sikhs, I met the Christians, I met the Jews, I met all kinds of religious people. And what I found is that at the bottom of it, the real religion is a religion of love. All the names and labels are just a kind of shorthand. Because if you are born in Europe, you are more likely to be a Christian. If you are born in Middle East like Iran or Saudi Arabia, you are more likely to be a Muslim. If you are born in Israel, you are more likely to be a Jew. So all these religions are just a kind of labels, names, like we call a country, India or China or Russia, we call a particular tradition or religious tradition with a particular name. But at the bottom of it, I discovered when I met the really practicing Muslims and practicing Christians and practicing Jews and practicing Buddhists, their religion was a religion of love and respecting each other, doing no harm to each other, and allowing different points of views and respecting those different points of views and not being dogmatic and not being like if you read the poetry of Rumi, and the poetry of Hafiz, and the poetry of William Blake. I mean, there is no difference between Tagore and William Blake. There is no difference between a Hindu poet and a Muslim poet. So the essence, our true religion is a religion of love. And that's what I discovered by walking around the world.
Wonderful. And having done this walk and having developed all of those different experiences, making you who you are and changing, you met some fantastic people along the way, I know, as well. People that, are really celebrated in history now as well. The world leaders, but not just world leaders, real thought leaders, people that were really changing the world and being very radical for what they wanted with equality and activism as well. That must have been incredible as well to have met some of the people along the way.
Absolutely. I met some famous people, but some people I met who are as inspiring as famous people. Of course, it was great to meet Bertrand Russell himself, because he was the inspiration. And so when I met Bertrand Russell, he was so warm and so friendly, and he was pouring tea himself, even at age 92. And we discussed about the idea that what is peace? And for Bertrand Russell, to some extent, the absence of war and the absence of nuclear weapons and absence of kind of arms race was peace. But I said to Bertrand Russell that the real peace is absence of fear. Not only absence of war and absence of weapons, but absence of fear. And as long as we have fear in our heart, we cannot have peace. And that was a very, very interesting, good discussion. And Bertrand Russell said that you have walked all the way from India to England, mostly land, and therefore you could walk, but you can't go over the Atlantic. Can I give you some money? And I said to Lord Russell that we cannot take money. We have not touched money for 2 years. But if you will give us 2 tickets in a boat, we will be delighted and will be grateful. And he helped to arrange 2 tickets for us in the Queen Mary, and we sailed across the Atlantic. And then when we arrived in America, we were delighted after hearing the I Have a Dream speech of Martin Luther King. We wrote to him, and we were delighted to see him. He was truly an embodiment of peace. He was truly an embodiment of love. He was put in jail for 29 times in his career as a kind of peace activist. And yet, never a shred of revenge in his heart, never a single word of anger in his mouth. That was amazing. I've never met somebody as an embodiment of love and peace and generosity and kindness and forgiveness. That was something very inspiring. But apart from these famous people that I had privilege and honor of meeting, what I remember even more is the ordinary people, writers, painters, musicians, John Byers, for example, and many others who I met. And this inspired me that there are so many activists at the grassroots level who are contributing the good sort of ideas and a message of peace through music, through singing, through painting, through gardening, through doing simple ordinary things. And yet they were contributing, like John Lennon's song, Imagine. It's a great contribution to peace and love. We Shall Overcome was a great song. Whoever wrote it I think those are the symbol of activism. Activism is not only protesting in Trafalgar Square. Activism can come in many, many different forms. And so for me, that was a great discovery.
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest things about your work for me is those multiple ways in which people can have a voice and contribute. Everybody's included.
Everybody included. And Matthew, you are the similar sort of good example that to your poetry, you are inspiring and encouraging and helping many people to come out. And I think poetry can be a very great way of bringing new consciousness. And therefore, I always remember kind of William Blake and Sufi poets like Rumi and Hafiz and Tagore and Walt Whitman and Gary Snyder and Wendell Berry and so many other poets. I think they are great activists of our time, and you are one of them.
Well, thank you. I think a lot of the work you've done over the years with Resurgence magazine really symbolizes this as well, because this is a magazine that you were the editor of for more than 30 years. I'm right, 34 years, 35 years, and something like that.
Yes, absolutely. I was in England for a visit, and I met E.F. Schumacher.
Yeah.
And he was an associate editor of Resurgence magazine. And he said to me that, Satish, we are looking for a full-time editor, and you are the kind of person I'm looking for. And would you be the editor of Resurgence? And I said, Mr. Schumacher, I'm not in England. I live in India, and I'm here only for a short visit, and I'm going back to India. So Schumacher said, but Satish, why are you going back to India? We give you this lovely job of being an editor of a very good magazine. So I said, yes, but I want to go back to India to work with the Gandhians, because I'm a Gandhian and I want to work with the Gandhian movement. So Schumacher said, Satish, there are many Gandhians in India. We need one in England.
Yeah.
And stay here and edit the magazine and make it a Gandhian magazine. Because Gandhian ideas are ideas of elegant simplicity, of non-violence, of peace, of ecological sustainability, of regenerative agriculture. All these Gandhian values are needed in our time. So that's how I was kind of persuaded to stay in England. And as you say, I edited the magazine for nearly 4 decades. And I think this is the one magazine which has survived for the last 57 years. The magazine was established in 1966. And this is a kind of holistic magazine. It's a global community of people who are thinking in a holistic way, interconnected way. We are all interrelated. Resurgence represents the values of holistic thinking. Resurgence says that humans and nature are not separate. We are nature. Humans are as much nature as mountains and forests and rivers and animals and birds. And secondly, Resurgence says that humans are not above nature. You are not superior to nature. We are integral part of nature. And therefore, all nature, humans and animals and forests and rivers and oceans and mountains, they all have intrinsic value. And like we believe in human rights, we also need to believe in rights of nature. So this is a kind of message, a holistic message, where nature is not simply a means to an end, the end of economic growth. And even humans are not simply a means to an end, the end of economic growth. Because our modern society, the industrial society, the consumer society, looks at nature only as a resource for the economy, and looks at the humans only as a resource for the economy. We call it HR. HR in various businesses stand for human resources.
Yeah.
I say, and Resurgence says, that humans are not a resource for economic growth and profit and production and consumption. human dignity is above all these kind of production, consumption, economic growth, and so on. So giving back the dignity to humans and bringing back the integrity to nature, that is the message of Resurgence. And it has been my privilege and honor to be the editor of this very groundbreaking and like a holistic magazine which promotes the values of interconnectedness and interdependence and a diversity at every level. Biodiversity, cultural diversity, religious diversity, economic and political and philosophical diversity, and even truth diversity. So if we can celebrate our diversity and not turn diversity into division and conflict and war, that is the message of Resurgence. And seeing through the diversity, we see unity of life. We are all interconnected. We are all interdependent. We are all interbeings. And the diversity and unity dance together. That is the message of Resurgence. And it has been my privilege to edit the magazine.
Well, and I love the way that the magazine itself has even managed to do that with other publications over the years, with Undercurrents, of which I have some very old copies of in the house, as well as The Ecologist more recently, and the way in which it doesn't stand alone and it's not a competitive magazine in that way. If something's in trouble or it's going to be lost, Resurgence has found ways of bringing everything under this one umbrella, bringing in different writers, and that's such a wonderful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also in Resurgence, we value, as you say, Undercurrents and Ecologists and other, we have all worked together as a kind of family of ecologically minded, holistically minded writers, poets, artists. And in Resurgence, we cover poetry and we cover art. We have an art section and book reviews. And also what we try to do in Resurgence is to bring a little bit of joy. Our movement should not be a movement of anger and anxiety. Lots of people are very angry and very anxious and very kind of frustrated. And we say that we don't want our movement to be a movement of misery. We want people to enjoy being part of the movement. We want a movement of happiness. And there should be pleasure and joy and fun to protest, to protect, to build, to be organic, to be ecological, to bring renewable energy. All these should be fun. So this is what we want, because at the moment our media is so miserable. If you read the Telegraph, the Times, the Mail, the Mirror, the Guardian, all these papers are all miserable. Miserable Times, miserable Mail, miserable Mirror, miserable Guardian, miserable BBC. And lots of our ecological oriented movement is very miserable. They are always complaining. So Resurgence brings a message of joy, change, transformation, ecological renewal, organic farming, organic gardening, renewable energy, and living a good life, elegant and simple life should be fun and joy. And we should do our best to create a new world order. Should be fun and not a pressure, not a burden, not a misery or that kind of thing. So I want, and Resurgence wants, our ecology movement, green movement, environmental movement to be fun and joy and not a miserable kind of protest.
Yeah, here. We definitely need the joy, don't we? And it's bringing it too. So yeah. Thank you for that. I was reminded recently, I was reading a book by Richard King called Brittle with Relics. It's a history of Wales, a history of the sort of industrial and post-industrial Wales. And I got to about 5 or 6 chapters in, and all of a sudden I landed in Pembrokeshire. And there's a chapter about Pembrokeshire and John Seymour and you, Satish, and building a community there. So before you came to live in Devon, you were based in Pembrokeshire. Is that where you began with the Resurgence magazine as well in Wales?
No. We began Resurgence in London.
Yeah.
My wife June and I jointly edited Resurgence from Kentish Town in London. And from 1973 to 76, we were there. But then we felt that we have to practice what we are writing about. We are writing about ecology. We are writing about sustainability. We are writing about self-sufficiency. We are about organic farming, renewable energy. But we don't practice in London. We live in a kind of very urban and suburban life. And so we should practice and be the change that we want to see in the world. And so we wanted to move out of London and go in Pembrokeshire and be on the land in the neighborhood of John Seymour and a garden and a cook and make cheese and make butter and live a simple life. So how you can have a joyful, simple, elegant life and reduce our footprint on the planet Earth, reduce our kind of carbon emission on planet Earth, and reduce our negative impact. So how to live simply, elegantly, ecologically, and joyfully. That was the experiment. So then we went to Pembrokeshire. But we did not have a proper firm base there. So we were there for 77, 78, 79. And then we got a very good offer from Dartington Hall Trust that if you come to Devon, they will support us and support the Researchers magazine. And so we managed to find a more permanent base in Devon. So we moved from Pembrokeshire to Devon. But Pembrokeshire was a very good experience for us. And we had a wonderful time with Centre for Alternative Technology. And we had a wonderful time with Patrick Holden and his organic farm, and John Seymour and his self-sufficiency movement. And then lots of, at that time when Center for Alternative Technology was promoting renewable energy through windmills and solar panels, everybody thought that they were kind of idealistic fools. Never renewable energy can meet the needs of British energy and British industry and British households. But at that time, nobody knew and thought that renewable energy can be a real source of energy. But now, in Britain, nearly 35% of energy is coming from the renewable sources. So, the idealistic, the fools, you were called at that time, had a point. And we made the point, and Center for Alternative Technology and the movement for renewable energy is now thriving. So that was the kind of experience in Pembrokeshire for us.
Yeah, it was incredible to read about Centre of Alternative Technology and all of these things coalescing and blooming and beginning. And I think, the other thing that I always think about when I think about you, Satish, is education, and more than education, learning, and your approach to that, because I think it's very refreshing. It's continually refreshing to think about education through your eyes, because not only have you talked a great deal about learning and experience and all of the things that bring learning to life, but you've done it as well. The small school, the Resurgence Trust, and everything that it does with the courses, but of course Schumacher College, and and all of those things. When I was reading about Centre of Alternative Technology and John Seymour's books and those influences, this is a lifetime of education being at the heart of your work. It's a peaceful way of approaching it. But your approach to education, some people might say, is an alternative approach to the mainstream. But I see it as one that, just like you were talking about alternative technology, it's the only way really to progress. So I'd just love to end the conversation for the last few minutes on your approach to education and why this is such an important part of your work.
Yes, Matthew. I started small school and Schumacher College, and particularly Schumacher College, in 1991. And the first teacher we had was James Lovelock, teaching Gaia hypothesis. The reason I started Schumacher College was that most of our universities, when they get young people there, they look at them and they think that young people have no body. They have no heart. They have no hands. They have no legs. They have only brain. And only half brain, because we have two hemispheres in our brain. The left hemisphere is the hemisphere of more rational and more scientific, more mathematical, more analytical, more administrative, more managerial. the right hemisphere of the brain is more intuitive, more relational, more spiritual, more creative, more imaginative, more poetic, and more artistic. So our universities mainly don't touch the right brain, only educate the left brain, and nothing to do with hands and nothing to do with heart. No teaching of any compassion, kindness, generosity, relationship, respect, love, all these values, heart values, courage. Courage is a heart value. Kar means heart. So courage is a heart, resilient and strong heart. So our educational system lacks the education of heart, education of hands, education of body, education of feelings. And therefore, Schumacher College, we started, and we said that our education should be nature-based. Nature is our teacher. Nature is, we don't learn about nature, we learn from nature. And nature is our source of learning. And so we are a community. So Schumacher College is a community where our students garden together, cook together, go on Dartmoor together, learn from plant trees together, learn from nature. And so nature-based, earth-based, earth-centered, nature-centered education of head, education of heart, education of hands in a community atmosphere, cooking together, gardening together, all those things we brought together as an example. Because our university graduates from Oxford, from Cambridge, from Harvard, from Yale, from big universities of Beijing, Mumbai, Tokyo, all these people are responsible for the biggest problems of our time. The climate change and all the industry which produce carbon emission is run by highly educated graduates of Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and Yale, and big universities of the world. So education is a part of the problem of our time. And therefore, we need a new kind of education where we are educating young people, not just for the jobs and for the ego-centered education, but we want to educate eco-centered education. From ego to eco, we are saying that we are only making a small change. We are changing G to C, but that's a big change. And so ego-centered education is me, my success, my name, my fame, my prestige, my power, my money, my house, my car, me, my success. Eco-centered education is how we relate to each other, how we relate to the earth, how we relate to our forest, how we relate to our animals, how we relate to other humans. We are a community, we are a society, and we have a value, and we have a mutuality, and we have a reciprocity. We support each other, not me, everybody being selfish and for their own success. Our success together, mutuality, reciprocity, and a kind of sharing ideas, celebrating diversity, celebrating unity. That is the core of Schumacher College education.
Oh, thank you, Satish. And thank you for your time, and thank you for everything that you're doing. It's a wonderful thing.
It's my pleasure to speak with you, Matthew.
And now we continue, so let's rejoin Teän on St. Mary's.
We're just reaching the pathway down now to the next site. There's a very beautiful signpost, well preserved, pointing the way. So we're on the approach, Teän.
This is Innisidgen burial chamber. There's actually two. So the first one we're going to go to is the less well-preserved one, which is Lower Innisidgen burial chamber. And then there's one up on the hill, which is the higher one, which is a little bit better condition. And it's like very kind of spooky and eerie, the one up there. It feels very like a portal to the dead. It is really got a different vibe from Bamskarn, where we were just at, which is a bit more kind of bigger and feels more like a community site, whereas this one, well, we'll see what you think, if you agree with me, but it just feels really deathy there.
And it starts to feel a bit more remote as well, the paths. We're now on the grass path. It sort of becomes slightly less managed, although still very good, but it has a different feeling. We feel like we're more within nature down at this site.
the sea is just right here on our left. And this is the first one. And actually, I think the entrance is on the other side, which is unusual, as you think it would be facing the sea, but it's actually up here.
So is that so that the sun can enter the barrow, or the passage tomb here? Is it sort of?
They are all usually aligned that way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what this one's like alignment is, but it's usually like winter solstice sunrise or summer solstice, or equinox sunset or something. They usually are aligned like that, but I don't know which is which.
And these are all contemporary with each other, these sites, or thereabouts, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. They're all early Bronze Age.
Yeah. I mean, there's rarely a view like this. The islands are in the mist on the horizon. Has a very mystical feeling today with the way in which the light reflects. It's amazing.
Yeah, you can see the sort of shapes of the Eastern Islands out on our right, where that's Great Canilly, where you saw all the seals yesterday. And there's kind of one sort of half hidden in the mist over there, which has got kind of 3 peaks, which is Nornor, which is the site of the Romano-British goddess cult, where we saw the kind of goddess figurines and things, and the brooches, Roman brooches that were in the museum earlier. And that one was like a shrine where seafarers would go and pay homage to the goddess, it's thought, and would leave offerings. So they found thousands of brooches, lots of coins, and some Venus figurines, all from the Roman period there. Because back then, like the Isles of Scilly now feels like super remote, but back then it was like a real centre for commerce and trade because of the tin industry in Cornwall and the kind of like massive trade routes that went there. Like this was quite an important point for trading, so it was sort of now it feels very remote, but then it was very much like connected to the world and to trading, particularly when the rest of the land was a lot more forested. It was really much easier and quicker to get about by boat. So yeah, it was a big centre for trade then, and it was thought that this little goddess shrine was where people would go and hope for like a good seafaring voyage and like good weather and things. You go and ask the goddess to grant you that. Yeah, so we have a nice view of that from this burial chamber.
So, you were born on the Scilly Isles?
Yeah, pretty much. I came here when I was 2 weeks old. My mum had to go away to have me because of the medicalness, but I'm pretty much from, born and raised, we'd say.
Born and raised on the Scillies. And a hospital's a good thing, medical supervision. So,
yeah, that's very good.
And when did you first become aware of the prehistoric sites of the Scillies? Is it just something that's always been there in your consciousness?
Yeah, always. I remember like my first kind of standing stone love was the Old Man of Gew, which is, I was extremely lucky in that when I was little, my mum and I would live on Gew during the winters to look after the person who owned the houses there's cats, because they would go back to Kent in the winter. So I got to live on this incredibly remote, like even for the city standards, little tiny island with only 2 houses on it. And on the back of the island was this very majestic, very beautiful, big standing stone called the Old Man of Gew. And we just referred to it as the Old Man. And it was always kind of this sort of character in like life growing up. So that was kind of the first one I remember as like my first love in terms of stones. And then on St Mary's, Bamps Carn Burial Chamber, an ancient village, was just sort of something we would come and have a picnic at. And we would always go out in my granddad's boat, and he would take us up to the uninhabited islands where you can see boat-shaped chamber tombs and old chapels and all sorts of things. So it was very much part of the landscape for me, as was kind of myth and all the myths that are associated with all of these places. So yeah, that was kind of just as real as anything else, really. So I was really lucky in that regard.
And your art places you firmly in the landscape always.
Yes.
Do you think that comes from these formative experiences?
Yeah, I think so. I always feel very held by the islands, like a kind of womb or a mother or something. It feels really integral. I feel very rooted. I feel very filled up, like energetically when I'm here. Like if I've been depleted for a while and I come back, I'm like, oh yeah. I remember that feeling of the place that holds you.
Thanks for listening to the first episode of Stone Club Walks and Talks. You can find us in all the usual places, Instagram, Twitter, and of course our website, stoneclub.rocks. And don't forget to like and share the podcast. We'll be back soon with another walk and another talk. Goodbye.